Welcome to In the Background of Life with Kelly Ramsey, the podcast that invites you to sit down in a cozy living space, sipping a cup of tea while we embark on a captivating journey about our intentional narratives in our lives. I'm Kelly Ramsey, and this podcast is your warm space to unravel the stories woven into everyday moments. It's a tapestry crafted with intention and purpose. So grab your favorite cup of tea, settle in, and let's explore the unnoticed details that contribute to the intentional design of the world around us. Together, we'll celebrate the beauty in the threads that make life extraordinary. Welcome back to In the Background of Life with Kelly Ramsey. So we are just on our journey of understanding parenting as we move through. So our latest episode has been about motherhood, about navigating milestones and creating them. And today we're going to continue that conversation as we talk about the parallel process of parenting and childhood. So these are just a few thoughts on parenting through the stages of development of your children, as well as the stages of parenting that we go through as parents. We're going to be referencing today and for a few episodes, the Six Stages of Parenthood by Ellen Galinsky. And when readers read this book, one of the things that they noted is that parents will recognize themselves again and again in this book. So we want to be able to preference our conversation today with understanding that parenting is a journey, and that journey is about raising your children, but we have to include ourselves in the journey. Sometimes we hear lots of parenting advice and parenting curriculum and ideas, and we forget to include our own self in the process. I always shared in the classroom when I was teaching that we don't do things to children, but we do it with them. The same thing is true with parents. We don't tell parents what to do, but we partner with parents as we move forward. And so as we're moving forward today, we're going to talk about what that parallel process of parenting and childhood looks like. When I start this conversation, I always would like to start with the image of what you were thinking about when you found out you were going to be a parent. Now, being a parent could be that you birthed your own children. It could be that you adopted them, that you're fostering them. You could be a grandparent raising your grandchildren. So you're at a stage of your life where you would be celebrating and doing other things, and you take on the responsibility of raising your grandchildren. So just think about that. Those different decades of learning and knowledge, they're going to stretch us in new ways, but they're also going to give us new opportunities as we partner with children through those parenting stages. So when I imagine parenthood, I'll go back to my own memory, my imagination of parenthood started as a little girl, about 14 years old, imagining being a mom and being a wife and getting married and having a wedding dress and all those things and having your children and pushing them in the stroller. We did our baby dolls and we pushed the baby dolls in the stroller. So that was the image that I had created at 14. So at 14, I don't have much reality on what the real day-to-day life looks like in the background of life of being a parent. But what I have are images that I've created based on what I've experienced in my own childhood or that I'm looking at and experiencing in society. So that image-making stage is a beginning stage. It's actually the first stage that Ellen Galinsky mentions in her book. And so the image-making stage is where we're rehearsing the idea of what it looks like to be a parent. Not only are we rehearsing it, we're basing it on what our circumstances are. It can be influenced by our culture. It can be a picture of what we wanted to see versus a reality as well. And that's even before you become pregnant. So the image making is the first idea that we have. So when I was teaching parenting classes, one of the things that would come across is looking at our children right now as they are developing, and then what we imagine that it would be. So we imagine the child will be born healthy and well and no complications and everything will go on schedule. But sometimes that picture is different than the reality that we actually are holding. So there has to be an adjustment of what we imagine to what our reality is. The other thing is that I imagined that I would have a child in my 20s, but the reality was I didn't get pregnant and I got divorced and then I got remarried. And so I was much older than my 20s when I had my first child, my first children. And then the first one, I suffered a miscarriage. So I definitely didn't imagine that. And so as the second child was birthed and was growing and developing in my head, I still had those images of what it would have been like, what life would have been like. And so I had to take that image and I had to decide, is this where I'm going to stay? Or am I going to look at my present circumstances and see what this will look like? So there's some changes that happen in that image making. And then the reality of that is once I got pregnant, I had to accept that the pregnancy was actually happening. How does that happen? Like in that first trimester, you have the images, you have the ultrasound and the pictures, the realities of every day. My pregnancy I didn't get morning sickness, so it was pretty easy in that aspect. But my body was growing and changing, and this live being was inside of me. Like, this person is going to be coming forth soon, and I'm going to be responsible for them. So then that picture and idea. And then you start in the phase of preparing for parenthood. And so the quickness to understanding that, yes, this is real. Yes, it was really happening. And now I'm going to be responsible for that. But then you start some questioning, like, am I really ready? Do I have what it takes? How will I nurture them? How will I help them to grow and to develop? And they're not even born yet. And all these questions are starting to emerge. And so you start to begin to hear other people's opinions, but then you start to form your own. But the reality is that until we birth the baby, we don't really know all that it entails or what it will look like. So in that preparation, we start creating new images of what that life will look like on the other side of the womb. So think about all of those feelings of, will I have enough love to nurture them and to support them? Will I have what it takes, the stamina, to keep up the stamina once they're born in order to do it? And then in the utero, you think about, am I eating the foods I need to nurture them? Are they growing and developing and all of the things, right? And with each of the pregnancies that I had, each one was distinctly different. There's something that stood out about each of them. And I remember the first pregnancy that I miscarried, I just thought about the awesomeness that, oh my God, there is a live being growing inside of me. And the loss was detrimental. It was devastating because here was my image and my idea, and now it's gone. And now it's not going to be. So I had to have hope for it to happen again. And I had to trust and have faith and belief that I would see the image that was in my head. And then the second pregnancy, and I could see the image. So in the next stage, there's some early feelings of attachment. Like, because I had loss, attaching the second time, I was a little more cautious. Like, is it going to be a reality? Are they going to go full term? And so until I birthed the baby, then, and held him in my arms, I didn't really realize that this is really going to happen. And then I was overwhelmed by all of the emotions of what will it take to nurture this little being. So fast forward, now we're 17 years later, And I have managed, with the help of my husband and my community and those that support me, I have managed to keep that little seed alive for 17 years. That's the miracle, right? Because every step of the way, we didn't know exactly what we were doing, but we knew what our intentions would be. And so we started moving towards that. So when you think about the parenting journey happens in the outward. We see people parenting, we see the children growing up, we hear the conversations, we see the milestones. But what's happening inside of you? What are the things that you're holding in your heart and your mind as you watch this child get nurtured and grow and develop through every stage of life? I always like to say that the early years, birth to 8 years old, for me were easier years because I understood child development as a teacher, as an early childhood practitioner. And so I knew a lot of those concepts and ideas. But what about the parent that doesn't have early childhood as a background? What about the parent that comes from a home that's dysfunctional, that has the hope and the idea that they want to do right by their child and create a space for them to learn and grow? Where do they go to learn? Where do they learn to grow? And we grow in community. I really strongly believe that. And as we start connecting with other parents, other moms, other dads, other communities around our similar goals and values, what we learn is that there's some core pieces as to who we are and what we want to impart to our children and the legacy we want to leave. When I think about my own story, I think about the legacy of service and being of service to others, as well as being creative and exploring and a love for knowledge and reading. Those were my core values, and they still are very strong core values. I know they're evident because I can see them growing up in my children as they grew and as they develop. And so at every stage, in the early years, every stage, it was important to me to give exposure to the different things and different ideas. So when I think about that, I go back to my own childhood. I think about what were the elements in my childhood that helped me to be who I am today, to be creative, to be a servant leader. And it was the images and also the experiences that I watched that helped to develop the core of who I am. Today, as I record this podcast, is my maternal grandmother's birthday. She was at all costs amazing servant to others. At her core, it's what she did. It's how she took care of people. It's how she nurtured people. In that environment, I watched her serve others by cooking, by working in her church, working outside of the home, serving in her community. And I watched how she did it, and I watched how it was a joy and not a chore. And so from watching her, as I began to get older and I began to have children, I knew I wanted to have some of those same elements. I wanted to have Sunday dinner. I wanted us to be around the table. I wanted everyone to be welcome to that table. And I wanted to be able to learn how to nurture each other as we move forward. So as I pass forward to today, I think about my own family table and in my home. I think about those that we invite in, that we get to serve, and then we get to nurture. And then my first image is of my boys doing the same thing that I've seen modeled, and also making sure their guests are comfortable when they come to the house. That's what those stages look like as we move through them. So those images then become a reality. Now, stark difference is that some images we don't want, and some images are scary, are traumatizing. And so we also have it in our ability to be able to take those images and make a decision of how we want to proceed as a parent, as a family. What needs to be nurtured in me so that I can then become the nurturer, right? So out of what was abundance in my life, I could produce that servant mindset. I can nurture, I could do those things. But if my story was different, there may be some other layers of work as we move forward Now, I want to preference this by saying that it is wonderful that we have within our society help that is readily available. And so I want to admonish you, if you are challenged in any of those areas that I mentioned, reach out for support, reach out for help. One of the best decisions of my life as I navigated through parenting, navigated through the pandemic, was reaching out to a therapist. So I really would commend you to reach out to a therapist, a trusted parishioner that you know, a pastor or a clergyman that you can talk with if you're looking and seeking for some help and support. We need it along our journey. Parenting, it can be a lonely job as well. So you want to be sure that you have the support that's necessary. So we're going to just in that space, think about those early years of development. We'll continue to look at the effect of the parent-child relationship, the effect of those that are in your community that support you, and what does identity look like in that nurturing stage? Your identity as a parent, as well as looking at your children's development. One of the gifts that we have is that we don't have to go it alone. We can have a community. In the early years of my children's life, my community was my church family, my natural family, and our family child care provider, Miss Matilda. Miss Matilda is no longer with us, but Miss Matilda is still in our hearts and still in our minds because she nurtured the boys, but she also nurtured me as a parent. So even though I was in the field of early childhood, when it came to parenting, there were some things I didn't remember or I didn't know for sure. And so I'm reminded of her when I would go to a doctor's visit and the doctor would say, can they stand on one foot? Can they do XYZ? They were going through ages and stages questionnaire. And I would say to that, I'm like, yeah, they can do that, right? But in my heart, I was like, I don't know. Can they do that or not? And so I would go to Miss Matilda the next day. I was like, hey, can he do XYZ? She's like, yeah, let me show you. And she would reassure me that you're doing fine. He's developing well. And it's because of that collective community that we were able to do that. So as a reminder, know that we are partnering with you on your journey of parenting. And as a partner, we want to invite you to our A to Z Parenting Conference that will be held on May 18th. The theme is joyful parenting, and we're talking about bringing back the joy in our parenting. So I want to share with you that the joy of parenting can give us hope, rest, and peace. And so as we move through a world that is uncertain, we can hold fast to our families and create environments that nurture their spirits. We have that in our hand. We have that in our intention. Joy comes from somewhere deep inside of us. It's a burst of laughter that's laying dormant and emerges as your child does something funny or expresses their true selves. One of my greatest joy is when we would travel in the summertime driving to California. And sitting in the back seat with my youngest, I would discover all new things about him and about his personality. Even now, I can imagine some of the stories he was saying or what he was doing, and it just brought joy to my soul. So joy is from the well of our soul, the deep places that are awakened when we make connections, experience creative expressions like dancing, and connect with the innermost part of who we are. That's what joyful parenting really looks like. Now, the good news is that joyful parenting can enter in at any point of your parenting journey. Maybe the whole journey has not been great. Maybe there's been many challenges. But I used to share this quote with my teachers. What you're looking for, you'll get more of. So if I start looking for the joyful moments and I start looking for the things I'm doing right and things that are going well, I will see that more often. So today's action, I want to challenge you to look for the things you want to see more of. Is that joy? Is that creativity? Is it wonder? Think about, what do you want to see more of in your parenting journey, and then start to look at that. As we consider that, I also want to challenge you to answer this question: what brings me joy today? Just today. Don't try and figure out all of the journey. Just for today, what brings me joy today? And if you make this a practice of having gratitude for those simple things that bring you joy, then you'll see it come forth more and more often. And come out to the conference, because we're going to have a full day really delving deep into the joyful parenting experience we can have when we parent with intention. So I'm going to share this last thing with you of what brings me joy. Now, these were when the boys were younger, and they still resonate with me today. Watching my boys play together as brothers, knowing that they are going to be two against the world and emerge victorious. The other is reconnecting with childhood, my own childhood, as I put together a 100-piece puzzle and a beautiful image emerges, and seeing the boys around the table as we do that together. That brings me joy. The other thing that brings me joy, and I could literally taste these as I'm sharing this, is baking tea cakes and sharing them with friends at work, the boys' school teachers, and how it reawakens childhood memories of their grandma baking tea cakes and the smell coming from the kitchen as they return from school. That's a story my husband had. So when he talks about coming home from school and smelling those tea cakes, cooking and baking, knowing it's coming from his house, it reawakens in me the joy of serving and childhood and giving and being a part of a community. So let's bring back the joy, one step at a time, one focus at a time, and we'll be right here to partner with you in the background of life with Kelly Ramsey. Have a great day. This episode of In the Background of Life with Kelly Ramsey is brought to you by the Possibilities Podcast platform.